Welcome, webheads. It's that time again for the most supersonic, hypersonic, and harmonic cybersecurity webcast on the internet. So welcome to Head in the Clouds. So take it away, Jules and Jay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining episode 5 of Head in the Clouds. My name is Julie Haste, along with Jason Weber, and we'll be your host for today. In this episode, we're going to explore the importance of Palo Alto Network's Cortex XSOAR and how it can assist with security operations centers or SOCs functionality. In the studio with us today is Chris Kisselberg, our Senior Solutions Architect and Pre-Sales Lead at Cloud Harmonics. Chris brings over 11 years of experience in the cybersecurity space and is our subject matter expert on incident response. So Chris, thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Julie. Glad to be here.
So I read a recent article that I thought was pretty interesting, and it shared some results of an Accenture cyber investigations forensics and response business study. And it found that global cyber intrusion activity jumped 125% just in the first half of 2021, making the need for SOCs even more critical. So that's a pretty startling statistic. Can you explain to our listeners the role a SOC plays in an organization's cybersecurity defense?
Sure. So a SOC, or Secure Operating Center, is the first line of response in your incident response plan. These are the folks, analysts and engineers that are responding to alerts and incidents, and these could range from firewall events to endpoint events, somebody downloading a piece of malware or a phishing attempt, right? But these folks are looking through all of that data, and it's a massive amount of data oftentimes, and they're trying to prioritize that and respond to these events in a way that we can say, effectively, we're doing our due diligence, we're increasing our security posture, and if there are incidents, we are responding and resolving those events ultimately.
So, Chris, I've known you for a while. I know you used to work in a SOC. When we look at most SOC designs, like how they function, there are three main pillars. We have security by design, defense in depth, zero trust, and you can throw many other of those acronyms that we like to come up with every couple of quarters. Give me a little bit of an explanation as to why we do SOCs in that manner. What are those three core pillars? What do they really stand for? What kind of sets a SOC up for success?
Absolutely. So all three of those principles that you mentioned are pretty industry standard. So defense in depth is one, pretty common. And what that's saying is that it's not just enough to, pick one security solution and then think that that's going to provide comprehensive coverage, right? So it's not enough to just get a next generation firewall, right? We have to look at the network layer. We have to look also at endpoints. We have to protect users, physical assets, right? And that's what defense in depth is saying, is that we're looking at all aspects of security, not just a subset or one area. Zero trust architecture is compounding upon that ideas, and we are segmenting our architecture and segmenting our infrastructure oftentimes by business unit or your role within an organization. And the reason that we do that is because all assets, right? Anything that can connect to the internet today or a network, it can potentially be compromised, right? Any user on our network could potentially be compromised at any given point in time. So what zero trust does is it allows us to say, we want to validate everybody that they are who they say they are as they're interacting with network assets or servers or applications. And the last one, security by design. This is really looking at, security from the very beginning of a project or a new implementation. So let's say that you're expanding your infrastructure or you're creating new applications for either your employees or your customers even to interact with, right? That's going to require infrastructure. And we should think about securing that infrastructure and that application, all of the underlying servers from the start, right? When we think about security in the design phase, oftentimes we end up with a much more mature product and more secure product when that product, as I said, that could be servers, applications, a lot of different things that are interacting on our organization's network today.
So, we hear a lot about NIST frameworks and other frameworks that are out there. How do those differ from those methodologies that you just mentioned? How is NIST going to impact an organization, and how is XSOAR going to help to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover from an incident? What's it going to help us to do? What problems is it going to solve?
Sure. So when we're talking about frameworks like NIST, for example, the framework itself is a guideline. A set of things to consider as you're setting up your infrastructure, as you're setting up and making sure that you have a security posture in place, an incident response plan. So how do you actually respond to events? What are the processes? What are the steps that go into place that humans are going to take eventually? Now, when we think about that from a SOC perspective, there's a massive amount of data already. It's like looking and trying to find a needle in the haystack. So what XSOAR allows us to do is really remove that obstacle from our analysts and our engineers that are working in that secure operating center. From an orchestration perspective. So one of the common activities anytime you have an incident or an event is, you want to compile data about that event, right? Who was the user involved and what were the resources that involved, what, security controls maybe generated alerts in this scenario. And I want all of that compiled into a single workflow that can then be assigned to an analyst on our team, right? And then to expand upon that idea, there are times, and we're going to continue to find times where maybe we want to automate that response. Maybe we just know without a doubt when certain events happen on the network, we just automatically want to take a specific action of some sort. And that could be, quarantining a resource, isolating that host within the network, could be isolating the user credential account to make sure that they don't have privilege to touch any other resources on the network. But what XSOAR really allows us to do is take those policies that we've created with guidelines from the framework and actually put them into motion. We're actually going to go execute all of those things, and it makes our human response to all of these events and the amount that we can actually confidently say that we have responded or resolved much higher.
So Chris, with all the different SOAR platforms out there, such as Sumo Logic, Hive, Splunk, why Cortex XSOAR from Palo Alto Networks?
Sure. I think that the biggest strength to Cortex XSOAR is being able to leverage all of the great other security controls from Palo Alto Networks. Best in breed when we look at the next generation firewall, as well as advanced endpoint protection with the Cortex XDR solution, being able to secure both cloud native resources as well as distributed infrastructure through Prisma Access, right? No matter where your data is or your users are today, Palo Alto Networks has a way for us to secure that information and those processes. And again, all of that information consolidated amongst these resources, and then being able to enact that response, put the responding wheels in motion, as we talked about, that's really where the power comes into play. So,
I heard you talk about the Palo Alto platform. I mean, great platform. I totally agree. Is XSOAR only going to work if you have all the other Palo products?
No. XSOAR is its own product. It is a part of the larger, Palo Alto Networks secure operating platform. But one of the great things about XSOAR is the marketplace and all of the integrations. So we can consume all kinds of data from, third-party resources, whether it be, a Cisco or a Juniper, right? If our network devices can generate log information or alert information, and it doesn't just have to be those switches and routers either. We can consume information sometimes from applications that can give us data. And again, we're consolidating all of that and we're using it to prioritize information that would be appropriate to responding to critical events on our network. So no, it's not limited to Palo Alto Networks only. There's thousands of integrations at this point where you can incorporate data or resources from other assets on the network.
So this platform really takes kind of a more holistic look at your entire network. It's going to be able to take those logs from web servers, be able to take firewall logs from Checkpoint or Juniper, whatever they are, load balancers, all of those different places, and correlate it. So, what's the advantage? I mean, obviously, I know you're going to be able to knock this one out. Where a SOC is going to be able to utilize this, what's the huge advantage with XSOAR from a SOC perspective?
Well, the biggest challenge that we have, and probably every single SOC that exists today has, is, hiring resources and maintaining them, right? One of the biggest things we run into in SOCs is burnout, right? Burnout from looking at that massive amount of data. As I said, humans are not designed for that process. We're really not built for it. And that's the first piece of what I think, you're leveraging in the XSOAR, solution itself. So number one, having a way to integrate all of our information pieces into a single solution that has workflow built into it so that I can assign to other resources on my team, but then I can actually determine the level of response. So, what you're doing is you're creating something called playbooks. And these playbooks are just like we talked about with that incident response plan and your security policy. Well, now we're putting those into motion. So let's say that your firewall detects that somebody downloaded a piece of malware. Well, our playbook is automatically going to see that information from the firewall, consume that, and it's going to say, okay, we're going to isolate that resource. I'm going to send an email out to a distribution list, and I'm going to require human intervention from a member of our incident response team or security analyst team, engineers, whoever that role is that's going to be performing that action. But those steps, right? Again, we want that to happen every single time we see that critical event. Every single time a piece of malware is downloaded, I want that to occur within my network. And being able to do that and then get back to other scenarios, other events, right? When we talk about staffing and, staffing into the future for these SOCs, that's where we get retention, because we're providing them the tools to expand on their own skills through Python and through building all of these integrations into a modern architecture. And then, actually using them to respond to critical events on the network and provide prevention and growth for our security posture.
So you're really buying yourself that automation of those monotonous events. You're buying yourself the ability to be more proactive instead of just reactive after the fact, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So Chris, when you're having conversations with customers, what are you hearing most that would lead you down the path to recommend Cortex XSOAR?
Anytime that a customer is struggling with, their alerts already, and it's not just alerts, because, not every infrastructure or not every organization out there can necessarily go and field that SOC today. Sometimes we've got teams where it's, one person or a couple people, and they're in charge of networking, security, IT ops, all of the above for one organization. So it's a way for those smaller teams to still have the same level of security coverage as, your Fortune 500 banking solutions out there and companies or anything along those lines. Those big enterprise companies that can field large teams or outsource that to a specified, MDR partner or something along those lines. We don't necessarily always have that when you're working for a smaller company or a smaller organization. So it's another way for you to build that response platform and have that automated response, even if you don't necessarily have the resources that it might take to go staff a traditional SOC in all cases.
So, Chris, thanks. This has been very enlightening. I appreciate you taking the time today to come and visit with us and talk about XSOAR. When we talk about basically MDR and incident response, we have a lot of partners like Critical Start that offer a service for MDR. Is that something you would really kind of recommend for organizations that don't have those abilities to staff a SOC?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's probably the best option for those teams specifically. So, MDR, managed device response, they're utilizing these tools. So they're utilizing XSOAR, and they've also, companies like Critical Start have done a great job of then adding their own application integrations to that as well. So their team is going through your alert data, setting up playbooks. They're doing that portion for you. And then you're determining, okay, what do I need to see? What do I need to see in an information level to make a decision about, is this a false positive? Or should we make this a priority? Or do I need to go, actually physically walk over to this asset and start doing something? So again, those smaller teams that may not be able to staff that traditional SOC, we still want the same level of coverage and the same level of security control when we think about that. So that's where that MDR partner comes into play, and we're letting them manage that device response. It's exactly what it's doing for us in our own organizations.
Cool. Well, again, thanks for coming today. I really appreciate your time. I'm sure Jules does as well. Guys, look forward to the next podcast where we'll have Critical Start coming in to actually talk about their MDR platform and why it does set itself apart from the competition. And I thank you for your time.